Good Thursday afternoon to you, 4 o'clock time for Sports4CLE. Thanks for joining us. Hope you're having a good afternoon. So yesterday, Browns did hire an offensive line coach to fulfill that opening after they let go of Coach Dickerson. So today, they're turning their attention to the offensive coordinator's position. As we told you yesterday, and Mary Kay Cabot confirms it, Browns have completed their interview with tight end coach and pass game specialist Tommy Rees for their offensive coordinator vacancy, according to sources. They will be conducting more interviews. We have found out one of the guys that will be interviewed will be Seahawks quarterbacks coach Charles London, and they'll do that tomorrow on Friday. Now, this guy has coached under Bill O'Brien, Matt Nagy, Arthur Smith, as well as Mike Vrabel. Tom Pelissaro tweeting that out. Also, additionally, the Browns are expected to interview Dolphins quarterback coach, pass game coordinator Darrell Bevell for the vacant offensive coordinator's position, according to sources. Jonathan Jones from CBS Sports tweeting that out. Now, it's interesting to note, Kevin Stefanski was a younger coach on Bevell's staff back with the Vikings, so there are some ties between Darrell Bevell and Kevin Stefanski going back to his days with the Vikings when Kevin Stefanski was actually under Darrell Bevell. So again, that's kind of interesting as well. Also, this news coming out within the last few minutes, Jeremy Fowler reporting that the Seahawks have requested permission to interview Saints offensive coordinator Clint Kubiak for their offensive coordinator position. Remember, Kubiak was under a coach who has gotten fired. They haven't named a coach yet, so it'll be interesting to see if Kubiak stays with the Saints. Also, Kubiak, a guy that a lot of people believe could be on Kevin Stefanski's list of potential offensive coordinator interviews that would be later down the road. So one thing that we know is the Browns currently have the second overall pick. ESPN's Field Yates, Mel Kiper Jr. doing their second mock draft, and the way they do it is, in this instance, Mel Kiper drafted first for the Titans, Field Yates second for the Browns. This is who Field Yates took with number 2 overall for the Browns.
The Cleveland Browns take Travis Hunter, the teammate of Shedeur Sanders. So not Shedeur Sanders, and the Browns obviously are a team that will do something at quarterback this offseason, as at the time of this conversation, Mel, all we know about Deshaun Watson, who, by the way, you could argue needs to be replaced just based off of his performance, suffered a setback of some sort with his Achilles, does not sound good. We don't know when we'll see him next, but I think Cleveland is more likely to explore the veteran quarterback market somehow in free agency than attack quarterback with the second overall pick. Travis Hunter would fill a need for every single team because he plays both ways, but for a Browns team that picked off a total of 4 passes this year, if you wanted to make him a full-time corner opposite of Denzel Ward and play him at wide receiver as well, to me that would be a totally justified value for that number 2 overall pick in the draft. He's the number 1 player on my board. He's the number 1 player on your board, Mel. And I thought about this more and more as I watch more and more of his wide receiver tape. I could make a case that if all Travis Hunter did was play wide receiver, he'd still be the best player in the draft.
All right, let's welcome in Quincy Carrier, Untitled Unfiltered Browns coverage. Quincy, when you look at that, so Mel Kiper drafted Cam Ward number 1 overall for the Titans. Field Yates came back and instead of drafting Shedeur Sanders, took Travis Hunter.
Travis Hunter.
When you look at that, I don't hate that. If relative to Sanders or Ward, you got to be sold on whomever you take at that spot. If you're taking them at number 2, you got to be pretty darn certain that they're going to be your quarterback for the next 8-10 years.
Yeah, you take somebody at quarterback at number 2, you got to make sure that's the guy, right? Like, you got to be sure that you think that that's the guy. If you're looking at it and you're like, hey, I think Sanders, his ceiling is Geno Smith, you can't take that guy at number 2, right? Like, that's not a good enough ceiling for it to be worth that pick, because at the end of the day, Geno Smith not really a consistent tier 2, tier 1 quarterback. So yeah, if you don't believe or feel that way about a quarterback in this year's draft class, you just gotta go with the best player available. And again, I say this a lot. If the best player available in that, if factored into that isn't a quarterback, then you just go with whoever you feel like is best. So we'll see who the Browns go with there. There's a lot of defensive players that I think are going to be in the conversation for that. Travis Hunter is definitely in that conversation. One of the most talented athletes we've seen come out of college football in a very long time. Question with him is durability. And sometimes in NFL, being super versatile ends up being a bad thing for you in the long run, right? The guys that we came in that have been these slash guys, Kadarius Toney, Isaiah Simmons in recent years, haven't really worked out. You can even go back to somebody like Reggie Bush, who was seen as this all-encompassing, you could do everything with him guy. So yeah, there's going to be a lot of decisions to be made for the Browns. If they're going to pass on quarterback, they got to be 100% sure. So I expect them to do all their due diligence this offseason. But if they don't do that and come away thinking, hey, this guy's going to be one of the better quarterbacks in the NFL or has a chance to be that, then you got to stay away from him at number 2.
The other thing I would say is, even if you come away and don't think they are the guy you're going to pick, you got to sell what you see as being the best thing that you've ever seen in a quarterback, because somebody might get really crazy and give you a number 1, a number 2, and to move down 2-3 spots. And if that happens, you take that and run if you don't have a high enough grade on either of these quarterbacks.
It's the ultimate catch-22, right? I talk about this with the J.J. McCarthy thing. When people talk about trading for J.J. McCarthy, I'm like, if the price is good for him, then that's a alarm, because like it shouldn't be good. This guy was drafted 8th overall. Why is the price so nice on him? But if the price is crazy on him, then you don't want to do it, because like that's too crazy of a price for an unproven player. Same thing applies here. If you want somebody to trade up to number 2, but you're like super eager to do it, that's going to make them be doubtful about like, hey, what are we really trading up for, unless they're like super head first. Now, if the Raiders decide to hire like Deion Sanders to run the organization, and then like obviously Deion going to want to get his son, right? But other than that, you got to play the game here. So yeah, you're going to hear that the Browns are interested in quarterback, and they're going to do things that make it seem like they're interested in quarterback, because they should make sure, if they're going to pass on quarterback, that they're 100% okay with doing that, right? And if that's the case, then they'll make that move and move on. If they don't think that there's a quarterback worth passing on, they'll take a quarterback.
All right. You addressed this in one of your shows. Why do you think Browns fans need to know Abdul Carter? That's a guy you can watch in the college football semifinal game. He plays for Penn State. A little banged up, but he's supposed to go tonight against Notre Dame. What do you see when you look at him?
The upside is incredible with him. I see somebody who could be Von Miller-esque in his tape. He has incredible bend, incredible dip. He is very skilled for a player as raw as him. I don't think he's had his hand in the dirt all 3 years at Penn State. So he's relatively new to this pass rushing thing, and he's picked it up super fast. Great athlete. I know people are going to be worried about his overall size. He's not the biggest guy in the world. He does look like he needs to gain 10, 15 pounds. The question is, can he do that? But I think even if he doesn't gain that weight, he has a strong enough base to where he's going to be able to play well in the NFL. I think, like, so far in my research of it, that's my number 1 player in this draft class is Abdul Carter, or at least my favorite player in this draft class. I think he has a lot in common with Micah Parsons, but I think it more kind of goes towards Von, because he's somebody you could put wide 9 and just have him run around tackles. And then you have Myles Garrett. Myles Garrett can teach him those superpowers right. If he gets those feet right on some of those rush moves like Myles has, then you're talking about 2 guys who could possibly be the best defensive player in the NFL in a couple of years on your defensive line.
All right. Again, from your show, players that the Browns need to make a decision on this offseason.
Yeah, Nick Chubb's one of those guys. I expect them to bring him back. Right? I would be surprised if they don't bring him back. Greg Newsome and Martin Emerson, though, they need to figure out what they want to do. Can you trade Greg Newsome? Does Martin Emerson keep you from considering going after Travis Hunter? Because the issue right now is that if you draft Travis Hunter, where does he play? Does he play the outside? Because they don't want to move Martin Emerson to the inside. They've made that very clear. They moved Greg Newsome, a first-round pick, to the inside before they moved him. So, okay, you want to keep Martin on the outside. Does that mean you put Travis Hunter, who's undersized, who has injury concerns, in the most physical corner position that you got? That doesn't seem like a great recipe. So you kind of got to factor in, hey, do you want to extend Martin Emerson? Do you think he's going to have a bounce-back year? And if you think that's the case, then you got to probably factor that in if corner comes up on your board, right? If you're trying to decide between Mason Graham, Abdul Carter, or Will Johnson and Travis Hunter, then all of a sudden Martin Emerson factors in there, right? You got to ask yourself, if you're the Browns front office, is that a player worth factoring into that discussion?
Quincy Carey and I are going to step aside, take a quick time out. On the side of the break, we'll head to the voicemail of Truth and Reason. Sports for CLE will be right back. Stay with us.
Ted.
Hi, Betty.
Oh no, you wrapped yourself into a daze.
Holidays.
You need a break, so I got you Ohio Lotteries Home for the Holidays and Merry Money Scratch-Offs.
You could win up to $500,000 or $1 million. Oh, thanks, hon.
And they have games on the back. Has anybody seen my glasses?
We continue talking Browns with Quincy Carrier from Untitled Unfiltered Browns coverage. Let's head to the voicemail of Truth and Reason.
I see we're doing it again. We need coaches, so we just grab anybody we see. They never put any time into anything. They don't put time into the draft. They don't put time into hiring coaches. They don't put time into the offense. And that's all coming from our GM and our two-time coach of the year. They do it every year. We just grab anybody just to get it over with so we can get doing whatever else we do, go watch TV or something.
As always, appreciate all of the voicemails. Quincy, this guy was fired in October, so they probably did some due diligence on him because I'm guessing they knew pretty early in the thing they were moving on from Andy Dickerson. He coached with Bill Callahan, so I'm guessing they still have a decent enough relationship with Bill Callahan that they can call and ask Bill Callahan what this guy was like as a young coach. And he's been a head coach for 7 years. They're asking him to be the offensive line coach. I know you've kind of addressed the hiring of this guy. Again, I'm not going to pretend I know a lot about Rice's head coach, but if he coached with Bill Callahan on Brian Schottenheimer's staff with the Jets, I'm guessing he can probably handle the offensive line.
Yeah, and then also you have to remember he was a David Shaw guy for a long time. David Shaw comes straight from that Bill Callahan tree. I mean, this is somebody that, like, Bill Callahan clearly was like, yeah, I give the thumbs up on him. He's good. They seek that one out. Hey, look, if the Browns dragged their feet on this one and took like 3 months, the same caller would have probably called in complaining, talking about, oh, they're taking forever. How hard is it to hire an offensive line coach? They hired a coach early. Now they're not doing their due diligence on it, right? We'll find out if this is a good hire during the course of the season. What we know is that the offensive line made this very clear. They want to go back to doing what they did when Bill Callahan was here, when Kevin Stefanski was in charge of the offense. And it seems like this is a clear step towards that direction. And this guy seems very qualified for the position. So what's the problem?
Yep, I gotcha. So this is interesting. It's from Dog Pound Daily. 4 players who did not live up to the Browns' expectations in 2024. Number 1, Juan Thornhill. Number 2, Jedrick Wills, the former left tackle. Number 3, Dorian Thompson-Robinson, backup quarterback. Number 4, Elijah Moore. I think this list is far, far too small. Deshaun Watson? I thought he was going to be a whole lot better than he showed out.
Yeah, I don't know how you make that list without Deshaun Watson being the entire list. I mean, it might have been the most disappointing football player in all of 2024, let alone just for the Browns.
Martin Emerson? I thought he was on his way to the Pro Bowl. He regressed. Greg Newsome? I didn't think he had a great year. I would even say David Njoku. I expected a lot more from Njoku. I don't know if it was because Deshaun Watson's play was so poor, but I keep waiting for David Njoku to be one of the top tight ends in the NFL, and he's kind of in that 6 to 10 range. And I think he should be in the top 3 or 4.
To be fair to David Njoku, I mean, it's the same thing that they had with the offensive line. They literally moved away from something he was very successful in last year to, cater towards a quarterback who, again, was the most disappointing player in all of 2024. And that kind of like Deshaun, like the further and further away we get from the season, the more and more it seems like, legitimately you could point a direct line to making this work with Deshaun Watson, tore this season apart. That's it, right? The offensive line had a down year. What did they blame it on? The fact that they switched offenses. Well, why did they switch offenses? Because they wanted to make Deshaun Watson more comfortable. There's just a direct line to that being a major factor in the regression of this team. The offense not producing is part of the reason why the defense didn't look as good this year. I think you didn't get some good enough performance from like Martin Emerson, right? I think he really had a bad year. You got to ask yourself if he's going to bounce back from that. I don't think Juan was as bad as the internet makes it seem like he was. I think Juan was fine. Like he was who Juan Thornhill usually is. But yeah, there's a direct line that points to the offense underperforming, hurting the defense. Why did the offense underperform? Because Deshaun Watson wasn't playing. Well, because the offense, the offensive line was bad. The run game was bad. Why was that bad? They say it's because of the offense they switched to. Why they switched that offense? Make Deshaun Watson more comfortable. And it was just a lost year because they wanted to see what they had in Deshaun. And Deshaun had absolutely nothing to offer them.
Yeah, and I was all for trying to build the offense around Deshaun Watson. And boy, it didn't work. That was a bad idea. I was solidly behind it.
In fairness, you paid the dude $230 million. You got to see what you got, right? Like, there was no world.
Can we return that?
There's no world in which you pay a guy that much money. You're like, no, we're never going to try to put you in the situation you say is going to be best for you. So they had to do it, right? Like you couldn't just simply just sit on your hands and be like, oh no, Deshaun's going to run this system that we're going. So like you had to do this. It's just unfortunate that it went as bad as it did because I don't think people thought the floor with Deshaun would be as low as it ended up being in 2024.
Yeah, I'm with you. All right. So again, from your show, J.J. McCarthy, if he was coming out, he would probably be the highest rated quarterback. Is exploring a trade for him something the Browns should do?
I don't think so, right? Like he's coming off, like the problem with JJ is he's coming off that injury. Was it a meniscus injury or something like that? That took him out for an entire year.
Yeah.
So you're not just drafting J.J. McCarthy straight out of college. You're drafting a quarterback who has had a knee injury, who relies on his athletic ability. Now, he's super young. I see no reason why he's not going to be able to come back from that injury and be able to get back to full athletic potential. But it might be a year or two before he's fully comfortable cutting and planting off that knee, like sometimes it happens with the ACL tear. So it's not just that he's coming out and he's a pro. It's like, hey, he's had this 1 year out because of injury. And again, there's that catch-22 I talked about earlier. If the Vikings, who are making it work right now and are 14-2 with Sam Darnold, want to trade a quarterback that they drafted 8th overall, you got to ask yourself, are you trading for Trey Lance? Because everything indicates it's like, hey, you want to be eager to get that guy in there, right? Because if they're doing this with Sam Darnold, they should be able to, go to the moon with their guy that they hand chose top 10 in this draft to be the next guy. And if they don't feel like that is possible with that guy, it's like, do you really want to trade for him? Like that's ultimately the biggest, like when you talk about trading for a quarterback, that's the biggest thing you got to answer. It's like, hey, why would this team want to give you this guy who you think you can solve your quarterback problem?
All right, so
teams don't usually do that.
No, absolutely not. And it's kind of like what we learned when you look at Russell Wilson and Deshaun Watson and Aaron Rodgers. When teams are ready to move
offseason.
When teams are ready to move off the guy, beware. Just beware. So here is something that I kind of chuckled when I saw. Falcons GM Terry Fontenot on Kirk Cousins. We're comfortable moving forward with him as a backup. That coming from Falcons beat reporter for ESPN. What's he gonna say? We're gonna cut him. you're going to try to do something to get value from him. Just remember, he has a no-trade clause, so he can force his way out, unless you want to have a $38 million backup behind your rookie quarterback. I don't see that happening.
You know what that reminds me of? Remember that year where, like, the Browns had made the move for Deshaun, and then they were like, oh, yeah, we're perfectly fine with having Baker as the backup, right? Like, no, you're not. You're lying. Like, that's not what's going to happen. This feels very much like this. I'm interested to see where it goes. I could see a team thinking that they could trade for Kirk Cousins and get something out of it, but the no-trade clause that Kirk has pretty much makes this free agency, and that makes this point heavily towards, yeah, man, you're just going to have to release him and hope you get a comp pick.
Yeah, and you know what? That's exactly what the Browns should be saying if they plan on trading off of Shedeur Sanders or Cam Ward. He can, we are perfectly comfortable taking him at number 2, so bring us your best offers.
Yeah. That's why they had the report come out. Well, not the report, but Dynasty Receipts like, they're going to take quarterback. And it's like, yeah, do the math. We got to get – that's why they announced the whole setback with Deshaun Watson, right? Like, they want you thinking, hey, we might go quarterback here. So if you want a quarterback, it's not just you give us value on the chart. You got to knock our socks off to get us off of one of these guys that we love. Air quotes, right? Or maybe they do love one of these guys, right? But they're willing to move off of it for the right price. But the Browns, look, if they trade number 2, I don't think they're thinking small here, Dave. I think they're like, hey, we want to get some picks for next year's draft and the year after. Because if you look at that 2027 class and you look at that 2026 class, and like quarterback, there's going to be better classes for quarterbacks in this year. But man, could you imagine we have like somebody's first round pick and get a swing at Jeremiah Smith in a couple of years?
Yep. And they got lots of draft capital this year as well. So that's another thing the most draft capital to anybody. Quincy, Carey, and I can step aside, take one more time out. Other side of the break, back to the voicemail of Truth and Reason. Sports4CLE, I'll be right back. Stay with us.
Come back to go forward. Back to learning new things. Back to pursuing your dreams. Tri-C has flexible learning options to fit your life. And every year, more than 1,000 local companies provide Tri-C students with real-world learning. The right education can boost your lifetime earning power by hundreds of thousands of dollars. Start now with a college education you can afford. Tri-C, where futures begin.
We continue talking Browns with Quincy Carey from Untitled, Unfiltered Browns coverage. Let's head back to the voicemail of Truth and Reason.
Hey, guys. Huge game Friday night with the Buckeyes fighting to get past Texas, teams that produce starting talent year after year in the NFL. I try to watch certain players this time of year that the Browns might consider drafting. Who should we as fans be glued on that the Browns should or could draft from these two teams that make the most sense to vastly upgrade our team? They're both loaded with prospects. Thank you.
As always, appreciate all of the voicemails. Quincy, who you looking at? I don't think neither quarterback intrigues me. I think there's just a lot of questions about Howard and Ewers.
Yeah, Ewers doesn't intrigue me at all, but like Will Howard, I think he has some backup potential in the NFL, like some fun backup potential in the NFL. He does make some throws that make you wonder, like, are we lower on him than we should be? But then he does some things that make you feel like you shouldn't be excited about him at all. So he's kind of a mixed bag there. Defensively for Ohio State, I think is where a lot of the guys you're going to want to pay attention to are, right? Jack Sawyer, I think he's somebody who could be like a Sam Hubbard type in the NFL. You got Tyleik Williams, a very impressive 3-tech out of Ohio State. And then you flip the side to Texas, and you have Vernon Broughton, Andrew Makuba, who I think is like going to be a Mike Hilton clone in the NFL, hits really hard for an undersized guy. Offensively, they have Calvin Banks and Cam Williams on the offensive line. And then both the wide receivers for Texas, you're going to want to keep an eye on Bowden and Isaiah Bond. So yeah, there's a lot of talent all across the field, right? Emeka Ibuka for Ohio State. You're gonna watch guys that are gonna play well here, that are gonna be in the NFL in the future in that Ohio State Texas game. Same can be said for that Notre Dame Penn State game, especially on the Penn State side.
Yep, and Henderson's a guy to keep an eye on. third, fourth round.
definitely.
Travion, I think he's got a little bit of a future. So what do you think the best path is for the Browns going forward, and when do the fans trust the Browns again?
The Browns have to understand that the mistake they made in 2022 wasn't just going after Deshaun Watson, because I can understand why you would do it at the time. It was trying to rush the process, right? They wanted to jumpstart this thing and accelerate it by getting a ready-made franchise quarterback, and they were just a bit overeager for that, right? They have to learn to be patient about this thing, right? If you want to build it, you have to build the nest first. You can't be sitting here wondering about if you got the right offensive line. You got to build the nest so that you can have success with whatever quarterback it is that you want to do. That's what Washington has done successfully, and that's why they're in the playoffs with the rookie quarterback. Same thing with Denver. You look at Baker Mayfield, his success in Tampa Bay. A lot of people like to woe is me about the Browns about that, but look at his situation in Tampa Bay. Good offensive line, some good wide receivers. Defense isn't what it needs to be, but you still got those two things there that's help propping up Baker Mayfield to get better football out of him. If you want to do that, if you want to put yourself in a position to get a franchise quarterback, you got to put the time in this offseason to build a situation where the Browns are an easier place for a quarterback to win games. And I think that starts with this draft. You can build a great run game. You can build a great defense in this draft. And I think they should focus on that. And if they do that well, then next year they get a chance to get a quarterback, even if they don't have the top pick. They might be able to make something work with a guy who maybe falls to the middle of the first round, because they are such an excellent landing spot for a quarterback to be at. So that's what they need to focus on, right? Basically, it's like you get out of a long-term relationship. You need to get right for a year before you could go think about committing yourself to somebody else again, right? You need to make sure that you are ready to accept that commitment. And the Browns just ain't in the place to accept that commitment at all. We got a nasty situation. Deshaun Watson still chilling out here like, nah, dog, this ain't the year to bring somebody else into this. This is the year to build around that and figure out how you can have the best situation possible, so that in 2026, when you're ready for a rookie contract quarterback and when it benefits you more to have a rookie contract quarterback, you can take that swing with confidence, knowing, hey, you're going to have a better offensive line. You're going to have a run game be here. You're going to have an identity as an offense, and you're going to have the defense humming at a level that it did in 2023.
All right, so you look at the Browns, I think it's 5 picks in the top 103. What areas do you think, and you have a general idea of areas that are strengths, what areas do you think they address in those top 4 or 5 picks that need an infusion of youth?
I think this draft is going to offer you a lot on the trenches and in the run game, right? So tight ends, offensive line, defensive ends, edge rushers, and running backs. Maybe they get a corner at the top of this draft. Maybe they don't. But that's where this draft has a lot to offer you. If you want to get some 3 techs, this is the year to get some 3 techs. If you want to get some edge rushers, this is the year to get some edge rushers. If you want to get an offensive guard especially, this is the year to get a guard, right? There's going to be tons of guards in this year's draft. Most of the tackle prospects we talk about probably going to play guard in the NFL. And if you need a running back, this is the year to get 2. Okay, go ahead and leave this draft with 2 of them. You could bring back Nick Chubb, draft 2 running backs. Your room's going to be so much better than it was last year. So this is the year to kind of load up on that stuff, the bread and butter, the meat and potatoes of an NFL offense. That's what you can load up on this year.
Quincy Carrier, as always, great stuff. Appreciate the time and the insight. Thanks very much, Quincy.
Thank you, Dave. Quincy
Carrier, make sure you check him out. Always really good Browns coverage. Untitled, Unfiltered. Check him out. Really good stuff. We're going to step aside, take a quick time out. We continue talking Browns. Casey Kinnamon from the Orange and Brown Report. Straight ahead.
Come back to go forward. Back to learning new things. Back to pursuing your dreams. Tri-C has flexible learning options to fit your life. And every year, more than 1,000 local companies provide Tri-C students with real-world learning. The right education can boost your lifetime earning power by hundreds of thousands of dollars. Start now with a college education you can afford. Tri-C, where futures begin.
Head.
Hi, Betty.
Oh no, you wrapped yourself into a daze.
Holidays.
You need a break, so I got you Ohio Lotteries Home for the Holidays and Merry Money Scratch-Offs.
You could win up to $500,000 or $1 million. Oh, thanks, hon.
And they have games on the back. Has anybody seen my glasses?
I am powerful beyond my wildest imagination.
I will define my future.
I will keep challenging myself to improve.
Because I am a future leader of this great nation.
I will be responsible for raising a beautiful family.
And educating not only my generation, but many more to come.
I will make a difference in my community.
And I will stand up for what I believe in.
I will not settle for simply chasing my dreams. I will achieve them.
Because I was given a chance.
An opportunity.
A home.
At Family, Career, and Community Leaders of America.
The ultimate leadership experience.
FCCLA has been one of the greatest experiences of my life.
It's made me who I am today.
Join us. We'll build a new future together.
We continue talking Browns on Sports4CLE. Let's head back to the voicemail of Truth and Reason.
Hey, Dave, Frank from Cleveland. Called earlier in the week about taking the kid out of Arizona, McMillan. Not at number 2. I'm with you. Trade back, depending who wants to give most for this number 2 pick so they can get one of the quarterbacks, because I think Cam Ward is the second coming of Anthony Richardson with no structure in his game, but he's a good athlete. So one other question, if the kid from Penn State comes out, where would you rank him among the quarterbacks? And thanks for taking my call, Dave. I love you, brother. You and the family be safe and stay warm.
As always, appreciate all of the voicemails. Let's welcome in Casey Kinnamon from the Orange and Brown Report, the All Eyes on Cleveland podcast, the Barking Browns podcast. If you don't take one of those 2 quarterbacks, being Ward or Sanders, you're probably trading back. If Drew Aller goes out and plays well, I've seen some reports that think he has more of an NFL game. He's got no wide receivers, so he'll be used to throwing to guys that do not get any separation. He has a strong arm. It hasn't translated at Penn State yet. I saw him play a lot in high school, and his arm it's an NFL arm. It is elite.
Yeah, if you were to think of what you consider an AFC North prototypical quarterback, you picture someone like Drew. You know, you're talking about the size, the arm strength, his ability to move, underrated. He can run too, you know. But we just rewind 3 weeks ago, and people were talking about picking him up, you know, in the 3rd round, you know, getting sneaky in drafts. He can make himself a lot of money if he's able to keep it alive, you know, this week and then next. So it's hard to say, but you're 100% correct. NFL evaluators, you're hearing them coming out, and they have a much higher opinion than the general public and the media does at this point. If you were to rank him here today, though, I would say he's probably QB3 in this draft as we stand right here, right now. But he has all the tools to be the best quarterback in this draft. It just might be a year early. But if you could land someone like that, you know, a little later, because I don't think you can take him with a 2nd overall pick, and that could be your long-term future, a player like him. And a lot of people were pining for it. I know he's from the area.
Yep.
But for me, that's the least important thing.
Absolutely.
You know, you got to be able to play. You know, if you can play, then all of a sudden you get a Bernie Kosar situation, because you can think back to a Charlie Fry situation. Yes, him being from the area got him public support and he got him on the field, but if you can't play, it can't keep you on the field. So you got to be able to perform to do that.
Yeah, and again, I think going back is probably the right move for him, just because it hasn't translated at the NFL level to the level it can. If he puts everything together, he's the number 1 overall pick in the draft. He has that kind of talent, and it'll be like Joe Burrow. If he has that type of, the accuracy hasn't been quite as good as I thought it would be. The arm strength is unbelievable. The makeup, great kid. I've talked to him numerous times. The NFL people will love him when he talks. He's all about winning and he's all about football. He was described as a guy that just watches tape. He is a tape junkie, which NFL coaches are going to eat up.
Love. Yeah, they love that. And this is also a weak class. So there's probably a lot of pressure on him to maybe come out this year, even not being fully ready, you could still propel yourself and be a top flight draft pick just based on the strength of this quarterback class. And then the next year, we always do this though. Next year, we're looking at it being better. By the time that gets there, we'll poke holes in their game. And that's just the way it goes. But he has the prototypical tools that you look for in an NFL quarterback.
All right. So Jake Trotter from ESPN, talking about what he thought the Browns should do in the 2025 draft.
Got so many different needs: left tackle, running back, pass rusher, receiver, that the wise move would be to trade down. And I think that's what they would want to do. Just knowing Andrew and his staff, that's typically how they've operated. They look at value, and you're right. Like, they don't have any young players who are former first-round picks outside Newsome and JOK, that are on their first contracts or earlier in their extensions. So they're going to have to make hay with some trade backs.
JOK was a second-round pick. Jerry Jeudy was a first-round pick. I think that's overblown. They have the most draft capital of any team in this draft. It's go time for Andrew Berry. You got to make this. This has to be a foundational draft, and you're in a different place. You were kind of adding pieces, thinking you were building to make a run. Now you better build the foundation.
Yeah, you still have your roster cornerstones on the defensive side of the ball, but you need to retool that offense, and you have to use your draft to do it. And you can't just take stabs of guys who could be rotational guys earlier in their career and work their way to be starters. You need to come out of this draft with starters if you're Andrew Berry. You need to, 5 picks in the top 103. You need to nail some of those. Those need to be guys who contribute right away and can be considered cornerstones, especially on the offensive side of the ball. And this isn't an overly heavy draft either, So you got to really make value. You got to find the pieces, do the work, get your scouting department. They need to come out with things that will fit and implement into what they envision this offense to be. These got to be pieces that are kind of fit in seamlessly and are able to integrate and hit the ground running. If you walk out of this draft, with all these picks, and you walk out with 2 players that really see time and the rest of the guys are considered development players, even if those 2 guys hit, this would be considered a failure.
All right, so this is from the Bleacher Report, 2025 offensive trade candidates. They go Evan Neal, offensive tackle of the Giants, potential suitors, Ravens and the Browns. Teams could be interested in Neal. Are those with questions at offensive tackle, low-risk rookie contract. Browns are such a team. Left tackle is, of course, Jedrick Wills, pending free agent. They go Kirk Cousins, potential suitors, Browns and Jets. Kevin Stefanski coached Cousins for 2 years with the Vikings, and if Atlanta will pay part of Cousins' salary, he'd be a sensible bridge quarterback. He also has a no-trade clause, so he can probably force his way out of Atlanta and become a free agent at a minimum vet deal. The other one, Jack Conklin, potential suitors, Patriots, Titans. Hanging on to Conklin could make sense. Moving him to generate cap space, acquire more draft capital would make sense. Dwan Jones played right tackle, though he struggled to stay on the field. Moving Conklin after June 1st would save $17.4 million in cap space. The only question I have about Conklin is, can he stay healthy? And I think it's more likely that they kind of restructure his contract, try to keep him for a couple of years, because he played as well as anybody on that offensive line. Granted, it underperformed. He wasn't the problem.
No, and he does have a considerable injury history, but after he was able to get back on the field, he outperformed my expectations by far. He was able to get back to that level, and it's like, I didn't know he still had that in him. So it feels hard to walk away from that, but you also have that injury history, so you got to weigh that. And he is due a hefty salary this year, but like you pointed out, that is a prime candidate for a restructure. They'll add the dummy year on the back. We know the dance. We see what they do. But you do have to have a contingency plan because of the injury history. The problem is the guy that you have slotted as his backup also has an injury history. 2 years in the league, 2 years finishing on IR. That's something they have to figure out. And for DeWand, this is a massive year for him. He's got to come into camp as healthy as possible, preferably lighter, and really show that he can and be a contributing guy who can stay healthy, because you can't move off Jack Conklin if you don't have anything behind him. So it feels unlikely they would move on from him. The first guy they mentioned there was Evan Neal. I honestly thought he was a prime candidate to be an in-season trade target back in 23. The Giants have been out on Neal basically ever since his rookie year. And I figured that if you're going to take a stab on a guy, you know how the Browns, when they view former first-round picks and they see a team's given up on them, they're not going to extend them. They offer them the 5th-round pick. We'll swap 6. It feels like Evan Neal could be that kind of candidate, but he's also not a surefire. We're going to trade for this guy, plug and play. You're still taking a dart throw that you're bringing someone in that you hope can be a piece. He may even be a guard at this stage. He really hasn't been able to prove to be a consistent tackle in the NFL. So counting on that seems weird. The Kirk Cousins, the general manager of the Falcons came out today, Terry Fontenot, and gave the dog and pony show speech about how we're comfortable with Kirk as our backup and that's how we're going to roll forward, because that's what he has to say right now here today. That song and dance, that'll change when we get closer to March. You'll start to hear the rumblings of trying to find trade targets for him. And if he doesn't, obviously has the no trade clause. So like you pointed out, if he's not happy with any of the destinations or people trying to trade for him, he could just basically opt out, and force his way out of Atlanta. And then we'll truly see what's going on when he gets to that stage, because I think you'll probably have more suitors than you think for Kirk Cousins. So it'll be interesting to see how that unfolds. But I don't know what teams are actually going to try to trade, knowing that he has that in his back pocket.
Casey Kinnamon from the All Eyes on Cleveland podcast, the Barking Browns podcast, and I are going to take one more time out. Other side of the break, back to the voicemail of Truth and Reason. Sports for CLE, be right back.
Ted.
Hi, Betty.
Oh no, you wrapped yourself into a daze.
Holidays.
You need a break, so I got you Ohio Lotteries Home for the Holidays and Merry Money Scratch-Offs.
You could win up to $500,000 or $1 million. Oh, thanks, hon.
And they have games on the back.
Has anybody seen my glasses?
We continue talking Browns with Casey Kinnamon from the Orange and Brown Report. Let's head back to the voicemail of Truth and Reason.
Hey, Dave, it's Bob from Chillicothe. Got a lot of speculation going on everywhere about what we should do at number 2. Everyone's thinking you got to take a quarterback if they're available, but everyone's just talking about the kid from Miami and the kid from Colorado. And we got a lot of evaluations that happen here. We got the Senior Bowl. We've got the Combine. I really don't understand why Will Howard for Ohio State isn't getting more consideration. He's a big kid. I don't know about his arm strength. What are the other options at QB? Does anyone ever really look at these kids? Maybe we don't have to take a QB at number 2. Maybe there's going to be someone that's going to be available in the top part of the second round to get, that we could get just a quality player. What do you think about these other kids coming up, Dave? Go Browns. Woof, woof.
As always, appreciate all of the voicemails. Casey, it's a very light draft with quarterbacks. Carson Beck from Georgia just entered the portal, so he's probably not coming out after the injury. Jalen Milroe, well, Tommy Reese will have an idea about him if he's still around. None of them wow you. I mean, you look at it, and maybe it's because we're comparing them to last year, but it's not a great quarterback crop.
Yeah, when we're comparing them to last year, if you look at Shador and Cam Ward, they're probably the 6th, 7th, 8th quarterbacks if they were going in that draft, somewhere in that range. But don't get me wrong. I mean, last year's quarterback class kind of historic. All those guys that played well and looked like to be, at least adequate starters, if not plus starters. That hasn't happened since 1983 with that number of quarterbacks. So it was truly special. But if you were just comparing the classes, this is very light. As far as Will Howard, it's similar to Drew here. Is if he balls out in the next 2 games, he can make himself a good bit of money. Now, it won't be first round money. He didn't have the ceiling, but he might play himself into a late day 2 situation. He does have the size, and, being at Kansas State and then coming to Ohio State and raising his levels. He went up levels that you want to see that. But I don't think he's viewed in the same kind of light as far as having that type of ceiling, but he can make himself a ton of money, even just being a backup in the league and being a spot starter. So that's where it's at. I think you bring up an interesting point though with Jalen Milroe. The relationship with Tommy Reese, if they decide to go with Reese as the OC, which at this point feels like the only way to keep him around, is if they think that highly of him, that relationship could come into play. But the question is where. Right. I don't think it happens at 2 overall.
No.
So would they just try to get the bidders, jump back, maybe jump back again and try to net a lot of picks, scoop him up maybe end of the first, or take someone at trade back to 7 with the Raiders, take someone at 7, and then try to jump back in at the end of the first to nab them. Because you know how that goes. If you were sitting in the fabled catbird seat with the first pick in the second round instead of the second pick, you'd feel good about it waiting that after that first night. But you might have to jump back up to guarantee you get him.
Well, the other thing you'd want to do is you'd want the fifth-year option on a quarterback. So if you had a guy high in the second round, you trade back in so you get that fifth-year option and lock that in. The other thing, Will Howard's arm strength is not, it's kind of average to below average. So that's one of the reasons he's late day 2, early day 3. Competitive kid, big size, but doesn't have the arm that the NFL views as elite. This is kind of interesting. So this is from Hard Knocks. Jim Schwartz in the defensive meeting room. Let's take a look at this.
So Miles, I was Googling Myles Garrett 14 because I wanted to see a photo of the actual sack, and this is what came up when I Googled Myles Garrett 14. That's Myles. That's Myles at 14 years old.
Casey, he was pretty ripped at 14.
Yeah, he's rocked up.
Yeah, that again. It's kind of interesting just to get a look inside some of the meeting rooms, and you got to do that to keep things going for the Browns.
Yeah, got to keep it light. Even in a down year, you got to keep those guys bought in and keep them entertained. And Schwartz seems to be able to do that, and to pull that photo up in front of all of his teammates, and it's he's an alien. Myles Garrett is an alien, and it shows that. What other 14-year-old looks like that? You can see it in his face. He was 14, but it's a grown man body already.
All right, so this is from the 33rd team, and it uses Tankathon, the most 2025 draft capital. So the upcoming draft, Browns have the most. You see the value on the right-hand side ahead of Jacksonville. They have 5 of the top 103 picks. So you have to find a way to find impact players in those top 100, we'll say 103 just because that's what they have. What positions do you make a priority? What are you trying to infuse young talent into this roster? What positions?
Well, the first thing I want to retool is the offensive line. So you need to come away with at least 2 playable pieces. They don't both have to be starters this year at the offensive line, but you need to come away with guys that you believe can really solidify that room and be part of your future going forward, for sure. There's no way you can look at the performance of the offensive line room, and there's going to be free agents added. There's going to be other avenues, but that is the way you get better long term at that position. I also look at running back. This is a phenomenally deep year at running back. There's going to be at least 20, 25 guys drafted in that range at that position. So that is you. And I heard Quincy talk about it earlier, is I wouldn't be opposed to taking 2. You got those late picks, take some stabs. There's Woody Marks out of USC. He's an older prospect, but if he's still hanging around late on day 3, I have no problem snagging him up, even if I do use a pick on, Ollie Gordon or somebody earlier, on day 2 or early day 3. So those are 2 positions I look at. Also, if we're talking about really going back to the Kevin Stefanski offense, I'm looking at another tight end, and and obviously you want a receiving tight end, but you need to be able to block. You need a guy that can really go out there and sell 12 personnel, sell that he's going to be a piece of the running game, keep things 50-50. Right now, David Njoku is the only guy on the roster that when you see him, it's not a tell whether it's a run or a pass. The other tight ends they had on the roster, when they were out there, you kind of knew what was going on. Now, they'll also use jumbo personnel to mask some of that when they go through heavy stuff. But you need another tight end who can block and receive. You need a complete tight end. So and just to back up, because we talked about it going into the season, and Njoku was the only guy, and you really didn't have a backup for that if you wanted to go 11 personnel. And then he gets a high ankle sprain, and next thing you know, you're kind of showing your hand when you send Jordan Akins out there. So they need to look at that for sure. Also, we know what this team does. They draft cornerbacks. They draft defensive line. Expect it to continue. They're not going to stop doing that. Even though that you look at their defensive line as a strength, their defensive end room is a strength. I would expect them to add to it, and if they don't find a trade partner early in the draft and they're forced to draft at 2, Abdul Carter is a name you guys should get familiar with. That is a player that they could walk away with if they can't get out of the 2 spot. Even though he already plays a position, he doesn't necessarily fit the prototype. When we say the Browns have a type at defensive end, he's not 6'5", 275, 6'3", that 240 range. But if they view him as special, that could be the pick. And you can play at that size if you're special. Look at Micah Parsons. Look at Von Miller. Like, if they believe if he's of that ilk, they could pull the trigger there.
Casey Kinnamon, as always, great stuff. Appreciate the time and the insight. Thanks very much, Casey.
Anytime, Dave. Thanks for having me.
Casey Kinnamon, make sure you check him out. Orange and Brown Report, also the All Eyes on Cleveland podcast and the Barking Browns podcast. We turn our attention to the Cavs. Sam Amico straight ahead on Sports4CLE. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program is dedicated to recognizing exceptional students, teachers, and schools throughout Ohio. Scan the QR code on screen to nominate students and teachers as Academic All-Stars and Teachers of the Month. They must be currently enrolled or teach in grades K through 12. Is your K through 12 school developing students' literacy skills to achieve success in reading? If so, you can nominate your school for the School of the Year. Students can win $100, teachers can win $500, and schools can win $2,500. Scan the QR code, fill out the forms, and nominate deserving students, teachers, and schools today. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program takes pride in honoring exceptional students, teachers, and schools across Ohio. Submit your nomination today. It's fun, fast, and free. We turn our attention to the Cavaliers. They won their 11th straight, defeating the Oklahoma City Thunder last night, snapped a 15-game winning streak for the Thunder. Donovan Mitchell, after the game, talking Cavs still not really getting a whole lot of respect nationally for the job they're doing.
I mean, it's very clear that we belong here. I don't think we are waiting for the national media to be like, oh, they belong. I think for us, we knew. But you got to go out there and prove it respectfully. Like, no matter how much we know, we've said in camp, no matter how much we know, you got to go out there and do it on a night-to-night basis. We went 31-4, people still don't believe. We win the night, people still won't believe. All right, we got to continue to just to be us. It doesn't matter, I think that's more so for Cavs fans, which we appreciate the annoyance of it from Cavs fans. But I think for us, just continuing to be us, and we'll be fine. I think, but you're seeing it. We got a lot of talented players, man, and if you don't see it by now, then I don't know what else to say.
With that, let's welcome in Sam Amico from hoopswire.com and co-host of Full Court Cleveland. Sam, it's a great attitude for the Cavs players to have, without question. That is what you want to hear.
Yeah, and they're showing it on the court, too. Donovan Mitchell had his worst game of the season against the Thunder. What was he, 3 of 16 from the field, 11 points. Only had his first field goal with like 3 seconds to go in the first half. And yet they managed to beat a team that really you could make the case was playing as well as them. The Thunder, of course, have won 15 in a row, as you mentioned, coming into the game. So the Cavs just showed really in that game, the rise of Evan Mobley continues, the comeback season of Darius Garland continues. And then, of course, you see, the role players and what kind of team this is and what kind of depth they have with Ty Jerome going 6 of 7 from the field, coming in the middle of the second quarter, making a big difference. Max Strus having his best game of the season since he's, debuted from that injury, also 6 of 7 from the field. So, and then, of course, the guy we always seem to forget to mention is Jared Allen, who had a monster night, led the team in scoring with 25 points. So, Donovan Mitchell's point is pretty good, right? You got way more than just him and Garland and Allen and Mobley. You've got all of these guys contributing, and as Donovan Mitchell alluded to, it's a whole entire group, and they're very collected, very unified, and it's just another example of what we've seen all season against the Thunder.
You wrote an article, and it's kind of interesting. So the winning formula for the Cavs: speed, simplification and chemistry, and it's kind of adding up to dominance.
Yeah, and it's really just a matter of the fact that they have all those things. Darius Garland, Kenny Atkinson keeps talking about how fast he is and how easily he gets past defenders, and that's part of the speed. But this team really does have a lot of speed with Garland and Mitchell and Karis LeVert. And, Mobley's not super fast, but I would say that, compared to a lot of other power forwards, he looks a lot quicker. So they have not just guys who are naturally fast, but when the ball moves and zips as much as it has been, and they're able to create open shots, look, they've got a lot of slow guys too. I mean, George Niang and Ty Jerome, Max Strus is, I guess he's not slow, but he's not super fast. Same goes for Dean Wade, Jared Allen. So really they look faster because of the ball movement, I think. And, part of that headline, of course, too, was determination. And you really see that last against the Thunder, they got down by 9 points at one point. And we've seen it all year. They just don't stop. They keep coming at you in waves if they have to.
So this from ESPN.com. It's every contender's biggest roster hole and the chances of a significant trade. For the Cavs, they say the biggest roster hole, defensive wing. Chances of a significant trade, unlikely. They're playing brilliantly, have great chemistry. For due diligence, they might see what expiring contracts and picks could yield. But if they do anything, it will likely be a small deal. And that makes the most sense. I don't think you're on a 70-some win pace. Why would you mess with the chemistry unless it was for, another guy like a Donovan Mitchell?
Yeah, they're not going to mess with success. The only thing that would change is if, maybe things changed a little bit between now and the trade deadline where suddenly a need we don't really see much arises. I think that they're going to stay on the lookout, maybe past the trade deadline on the old buyout market and see what kind of big guys, maybe center types or kind of Lamar Stevens types, if you remember him, just an athletic forward who would go inside and kind of bang, even though he was more of a small forward in body. He was a power forward position. So I think that they, potentially, and I even say that it's a long shot that they would go out and find another, big man or kind of physical player underneath. Again, I think that's a long shot. As you said, Dave, you're on a 70-win pace. You're beating the Oklahoma City Thunder after they had won 15 straight. You're going on the road on the West Coast for the first time and winning all 4 of those games. And this team's just very connected and been blessed so far with good health. So I just don't foresee them really doing much at all, if anything. And you know what? That's just fine because we complained all off season that they didn't do anything either with this roster and smashing success so far.
Yeah, and they have the problem that every NBA team wants to play. They got too many guys. You got to find ways to get guys more minutes. Stephen A. Smith, ESPN's First Take, was asked, can the Cavs win a championship?
They got size in Cleveland. They got athleticism. They've got shooters. They defend. They're exceptionally well coached by Kenny Atkinson. I believe that Donovan Mitchell is a bona fide star in this game. He's big time. Darius Garland is balling. So when you look at all the pieces that they have and the way that they're playing together, and you've got guys like, 11 different guys, getting minutes for crying out loud. Nobody's averaging more than 32 minutes a game. And you're young to begin with. You're going into the playoffs with all of those abilities, plus fresh, youthful legs at various positions. I got to tell you, Wendy, I can't sleep on the Cleveland Cavaliers. I'm going as far as to say this, which is damn near sacrilegious. Okay. Right now, until I see further notice from the New York Knicks, all season long I was thinking about Knicks, Boston. Nah, if I'm going to be an objective viewer, I got to look at the Cleveland Cavaliers and say, yo, peeps, they got a chance to win the chip. to win it all.
And Sam, I don't often agree with Stephen A. Smith, but when I do, I do. Yeah, he kind of laid it out perfectly there.
Yeah, and it is. They're the whole product. It's not often a team is in the top 10 offensively and defensively ratings, and the Cavs, here they are. I think number 1 offense, number 8 defense, somewhere in there. Usually, those teams that are in the top 10, they either go on to win the title or they at least get to the finals. That's the way this has gone historically. Now, there's still a little more than a half a season to go, so the Cavs have to stay there, and you can't crown anybody champs in January, unfortunately, because they've been so magnificent. You don't want to see anything happen but them win a championship. But I agree, wholeheartedly with Stephen A. It's entering the season, I think we were talking about the Celtics and the Knicks and the Sixers. Those were the teams that went out. Well, Celtics returned everybody from the championship. The Knicks and the Sixers went out and added some big pieces and are veteran teams. So, a lot of people had the Cavs pegged as 4th or 5th in the Eastern Conference. I saw some had them as low as 7th or 8th. But, what's on paper doesn't always translate to what's on the floor. Well, like I said, we all kind of sat around and were like, really, that's it? That's all the Cavs are going to do is hire a coach? Well, that coach and their natural growth has been everything. On paper, you look at it and it's like, yeah, they don't maybe stack up against some of these other teams, but on the court and the way they're playing and the style they're playing, and Kenny Atkinson really getting the best out of everybody. You don't look at anybody on the Cavs and say, well, he's having a down season. No, you say he's having a really good season. So all those things combined, along with the offense and their elite defensive, especially at the rim with Allen and Mobley and Dean Wade on the perimeter. It's hard to say, that they couldn't win a championship. You wouldn't say that right now. You'd sound insane.
Yeah, and you know what? Credit Kobe Altman, because I'm with you. I was like, okay, I don't see this, but clearly Kenny Atkinson sold Kobe Altman on how he was going to do it. And I know it's only January, but looks like he knew what he was doing.
Yeah, he came in right away, and it was pretty clear. He made it. His message to the team was, Evan, we're going to get you to another level offensively. We're going to have you do more. And, that was kind of the message. And I'm not saying J.B. Bickerstaff was at fault here. It wasn't getting across, and they weren't figuring out a way to do it, to get Evan Mobley more involved offensively. Well, the way to do that we've seen is get him taking more three-pointers, get him feeling comfortable taking three-pointers, and getting the rebounds off the backboard and initiating the offense. Either whether it's on the break or even sometimes in the half-court offense. Evan Mobley's playing a very similar role to Draymond Green in Golden State, kind of the point forward a little bit. So I think that's been a big rise. Darius Garland struggled last year, very uneven season with injuries, said he didn't enjoy the game, and Kenny Atkinson has really brought that back. So, I think we said all along with the Cavs the last couple of years, they need to get Mobley to another level, and they need to get Garland back to his all-star form. Well, I think both of those guys have exceeded that this year already. And yeah, Kenny Atkinson's been a huge reason why, and you're right. You got to credit Kobe Altman for making the right coaching hire.
Sam Amico, as always, great stuff. Appreciate the time and the insight. Thanks very much, Sam.
All right, Dave, thanks a lot for having me. We'll talk to you soon.
Sounds good. Sam Amico, make sure you check him out. Hoopswire.com as well as Full Court Cleveland. That's going to do it for this edition of Sports for CLE. We'll see you back here tomorrow at 4 o'clock. Have a great night, everybody. See you tomorrow at 4 on Sports for CLE.